And welcome back to the Ghost and Friends YouTube channel. And welcoming back, it's the return of the Brandy Mac. We'll call it that. How are we doing, Brandy?
Doing great. Ready for tomorrow, the start of Sweet 16 games. This is the best time of the year, in my opinion. So I'm nothing but smiles.
Yeah, as you should be. It's kind of crazy because, it's a 3-week tournament, essentially 3.5 weeks, I guess. And you get through the first weekend and you're like, oh my gosh, we just made it through the weekend. And you got a 3-day break and you're right back into action tomorrow with Michigan. So, I mean, how do you feel, about this team? You've been such a big fan. You've seen it through, from game one. You're talking about Auburn basketball. It feels like on a daily basis. Be proud for a minute. How proud of you are you of Bruce Pearl's Tigers and just where they're at in the position they put themselves to go further?
Yeah, it's honestly been incredible to see because growing up as a kid, I would go to basketball games with my dad and we would literally stand outside. And this is right after Auburn Arena, now Neville Arena was built. And we would not purchase tickets beforehand. We would just walk up outside and somebody would offer us tickets as we were walking in. And now for home games at Auburn, you couldn't even get a ticket on the secondhand market for when it's SEC play, like less than $200. Like the prices are crazy, and that's for like upper deck. So it's been incredible to see what he's built at Auburn, a school that historically like didn't really have much history when it comes to basketball. Like we were known for Charles Barkley, a little bit of a run in 98, and that was really it. And so for him to build what he has here with his SEC titles, SEC tournament titles, the Final Four run, and now he just punched another ticket to a Sweet 16. Like it's kind of surreal. And also just like all of the great stuff he's done for Auburn too, with his Outlive cancer research and how he's given back to the community. Like this guy like runs Auburn, and I'm so grateful as a fan that he is who's like leading young men on our campus.
Yeah, it seems like Bruce Pearl is a lot more than just a basketball coach in Auburn, Alabama. The fans, obviously has their full support. Brandy has mentioned she's probably making the trip to Atlanta this weekend. When you look at Michigan and, maybe a little bit of them, I don't know if they would be surprised there in the Sweet 16, but I'm a little bit surprised. I know some others may be. UC San Diego was a very popular pick there in the first, in the 5-12 matchup with Michigan in the opening round of the tournament. What do you think of Michigan when you look at the Wolverines? And have you done? I know you've done some film study. I've seen you tweet about it days ago, so you've been ready. Yeah. What do you think about them?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Auburn because of the front court, and it's probably what everybody's going to say, but it is true. They run a double big system just like Auburn does this year, and Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden. And Danny Wolf played for the Yale team last year that beat Auburn. And I actually do think Janai played really well against Danny Wolf last year, but he was having to play just against Danny Wolf, not against Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup. Vlad Golden does kind of stay in drop coverage in the interior, and that is something that our guards were able to take advantage of against Creighton because Kalkbrenner did the same thing. So I think there's an opportunity there for Tahad Pettiford, Denver Jones, and Chad Baker-Mazara to really drive to the basket and score in the paint and kind of create a little bit of a mismatch there when it comes to athleticism against Golden. And this team for Michigan, they're good, but they do turn the ball over a lot. Their guards do. And so Auburn kind of is known for a little bit of a pesky defense. Our guard on-ball defense, Denver Jones, he's incredible. So him and Miles Kelly, their impact on the defensive side of the ball and creating turnovers and, getting fast break points, I think will be huge for Auburn's possibility of winning this game.
No, you think you nailed the Michigan scouting report perfectly. Everything runs through Big Danny Wolf and Big Bad Vlad Golden, and they ate A&M up there in the second half, just being consistent, and they really didn't do a lot on the defensive end. And so I kind of wonder, can Michigan guard you guys? And if they turn the ball over, I think that's where things can get really, really get dicey here for Michigan, like you said. They did a lot better job with A&M, limiting turnovers. Trey Donaldson, Roddy, I think it's Roddy Gale, played really, really well, especially late in that game. But Auburn's a different animal. What did Mr. Pearl say? You have guards that aren't afraid to go defend, and so I think Auburn. Right now this is, to me, it looks like another time for them to just continue proving themselves. You still got to go play the basketball game. Those two big guys for Michigan are no joke, and I chose UC San Diego. I chose Texas A&M. So probably the last thing anyone that is pulling for Auburn this weekend wants to hear is that I expect Auburn to do pretty well against that Michigan front court, which is a good chance that if they play neutral in the front court, then there's a really, really good chance Auburn wins that game. Evan, this is unfortunately TCU purple. Daughters Club volleyball team is purple, so we have now adopted this color into our color scheme. It does look weird in the closet though, because there's very, very little of it, and the rest is orange and a lot of blue. But so yeah, I mean, overall, 1 to 10, give me like a worry factor for you. What would it fall in that range? Obviously, one
I
be
would
the
say 1 being like not worried and 10
right.
being very okay. I would honestly put it around 6,
Okay.
because one of the things that Auburn has done towards the end of the season is gotten a tad complacent and haven't respected our opponents the way that we respected them at the beginning of the year. They haven't been playing with a chip on their shoulder because at the beginning of the year, nobody thought this team was the best team in the country. And this past weekend, in the round of 64 game, there was some concerns there. Like Alabama State hung around at the very beginning, and that's the worst team that Auburn has played all season long. And obviously we still won by 20, but in the post-game radio press conference, Dylan Cardwell was interviewed, and he was like, today is not going to cut it. Like he basically was like, I want to keep getting free hotel breakfast. Like he literally said that. And he was like, and I want to keep hanging out with my friends that I love and this team that I love. And he's a 5th-year senior. He was like, I want to keep playing basketball. And if we play like we did today, we're going to go home on Saturday last week. So that really fired up the team. And not only did it fire up the team, it fired up him. He had an incredible defensive game against Creighton. And so this was said in an interview earlier this season by Janai. He was like, I don't think anybody on any day can beat Auburn except for Auburn. And I think that's what happened in the regular season game against Texas A&M too. We had already clinched the regular season title, and we had a short turnaround off an emotional win at Kentucky and in between the Iron Bowl. And it just kind of seemed like we were out of it a little bit and not giving 100% effort. And you kind of, if you look at our rebound stats and especially on the defensive glass, you can see that kind of show too. So my worry comes more from what form of this Auburn team are we going to get and less about like a basketball kind of matchup standpoint, because I do think for the most part, Auburn is not a good matchup for Michigan and Michigan is a good matchup for Auburn. So from a basketball standpoint, not as worrisome. From what are we going to get from Auburn on that side? Like a little bit of a worry there. But we should have the home crowd in Atlanta. So
Absolutely. That's another factor you have to look into. You're going to be, I mean, you have to think it's going to be at least 80-20, Auburn faithful. It is not a short trip from Michigan to Atlanta. Michigan travels as well as anybody in football. Basketball, they'll travel well, but Auburn's right down the road, and they probably expected to. Auburn fans were buying tickets the moment that the brackets were released, I'm sure, with this.
I think Auburn fans have been buying tickets for like 3 months now, 2 months, 2 or 3 months now, because we kind of knew when you kind of locked in the number 1 overall seed and we saw the rest of our schedule, it was almost like, okay, all we have to do is win the round of 32 and we'll be in Atlanta. So I think people have been buying up tickets for a really long time for this game when it comes to Auburn fans. So I'm expecting a pretty massive Auburn crowd. I know there'll still be Michigan fans there, but that place should be packed with Auburn. But for some reason, this team kind of plays better in the villain role, like when they were on the road at Kentucky and on the road at Alabama.
Right.
They kind of feed off of that. Neutral side at Houston, that was in Houston. They kind of feed off of like being like that villain. So I always love a home crowd, but part of me is like, I wonder how that's going to play a part in a team that kind of has embraced being the villain all season.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, you did mention earlier, you questioned if they played with a chip on their shoulder towards the end of the season. part of that could easily be it's like, hey, we're ready to play some meaningful games, and that's not to discredit the end of the SEC schedule or even the SEC tournament games, but it's like, hey, we're ready to get to have the real opportunity to cut the nets down and play with our backs against the wall, and I mean, look pretty dang locked in. I thought they played really, really well in that second round matchup. I know you had a little bit of concern going into that one. I mean, a lot of people kind of had you guys on an upset watch there. The spread on that game was a little bigger than I thought it'd be coming out. But I mean, were you pretty overall pleased with how y'all played against the Creighton Blue Jays?
Yeah, absolutely. We were only down by 1 at halftime, but Creighton was, I think, 9 of 14 or something like that from 3. Like, they were shooting
Mm-hmm.
lights out from 3, and Creighton actually did that against Louisville too, and then went like 2 for 9 in the second half. And I think they did the exact same thing against us. They went 2 for 9 in the second half. So I was pleased like throughout the entire game. I thought the guys came out there playing with more energy, they're playing with more effort, and they were just dialed in, and we saw flashes of the team that we had been seeing all season. That was fired up, excited to play basketball, happy to be playing basketball. I think maybe they had lost a little bit of joy, which sounds kind of weird, but we saw that joy back in that game. And overall, I was most impressed with the defense, and I think that's really the last like 2 weeks or so when we had lost 3 out of the 4 last games that we had. I think defense was really where we were lapsing, and the defensive effort was incredible. So I was absolutely pleased with how he played against Creighton.
Yeah, I mean, Creighton can get hot and they can knock down a lot of shots in a short amount of time, and you just win that game and move on. Whether it be by 1 or by 20. I'm sure it wouldn't have mattered. You're happy to just be playing in Atlanta this weekend and still have a chance. Let's move off of Auburn and Michigan, and let's move, down in that region. Is Ole Miss the most impressive team to you through 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament so far?
Yeah, they've been so impressive, and they're really great on offense. I had a feeling when the bracket came out, I saw Iowa State, and I was like, that feels like the weakest 3 seed because of the injuries that they had had.
Right.
And they just weren't the same team that they were at the very beginning of the season. And I had a feeling Ole Miss might clip them, or maybe even UNC if they had played UNC. So that didn't surprise me that the lower seed won in that game. I'm curious to see how they play against Michigan State, because Michigan State has a really great defense. And
Right.
if there's any defense that I would trust to stop a red hot on fire offense that seems like they can't miss right now, it would be that Michigan State defense, or Houston defense if they ever met Houston.
Of course.
So I think it's going to be a really exciting matchup. I actually do think of the 2 seeds left that Michigan State is the weaker of all of them. I'm a huge Izzo fan, but there's just something, I think it might be like this front court or potentially the offensive style that he has with this team right now, but there's something missing. And I'm not sure what it is, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss upset Michigan State this weekend, because just how good Ole Miss is playing. But they do switch a lot on defense, Ole Miss does, and it allows opportunity for teams to get wide open threes off. So I feel like Michigan State was hitting threes pretty well. Akins has been playing well in their guard room. But if Jace Richardson has a game like he did this past weekend, I don't know if they'd be able to beat Ole Miss. So they really need Jace to step it up offensively, or they could be in for a little bit of a scare.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're talking about a guy shooting over 40% from deep. Impressive about Ole Miss, you have 6 guys averaging double figures. You have 3 guys, or maybe 4 guys, averaging that shoot it at over a 35% clip from deep. And so you're up against a really good defense in Michigan State. But if Ole Miss plays the way they've been playing, it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to believe that Michigan State may have the firepower to hang with those guys. Never thought we'd be talking about Chris Beard and Ole Miss in the second weekend of the tournament, but here we are. They've looked really good. Again, arguably as impressive as anyone. Arkansas has been really impressive. Others have been impressive as well. But I'm with you. I think there's a really, really solid chance. Vegas is that's a pretty dang close spread on that game. I think Ole Miss fans saw the 3.5 points that they're getting there, and they were like, okay, Vegas even believes a little bit that this one's going to be really, really tight. If Michigan State, if Ole Miss is missing shots from the perimeter, it could be a really ugly, low scoring game, a first 1 to 60 type of game. But again, like you said, Ole Miss is going to switch a ton. Michigan State is going to have some looks. They're a little bit streaky from deep, but they do need Mr. Jace to get in there. Who is Crab Five? Is this the
That's
cool?
Maryland.
Okay, there we go. Perfect. But yeah, so I mean, I feel like we're both kind of, obviously comfortable taking Auburn there, and then both leaning towards Ole Miss there in that region as well. I'll let you pick the next game that we talked somewhat about, Brandy.
We can just go down how the bracket is. So then the next one would be Florida and Maryland.
Sure.
Down below. And I actually think that matchup is going to be really exciting. I think they probably have a long spread similar to Auburn's too. But to me, like Derek Queen is one of the best freshmen in the country. He hit the buzzer beater against Colorado State. And he's just so poised for a freshman. He's been really impressive all season long. He's just pounds you in the paint, and he's very aggressive, but he doesn't foul too much either, which is kind of what you want in a big. And in their guard room, Jacoby Gillespie has been phenomenal for them too, to transfer from Belmont. That's been playing really well for them this season. So I actually really love this Maryland team. I don't know if they have enough offensive firepower to keep up with Florida, because even though Florida had a little bit of a scare against UConn this weekend, they're still, to me, probably the second best team in the country behind Duke. And I just don't know how they're going to slow down the guard room that Florida has. Maryland's defense kind of, in my opinion, won them that game and helped them come back against Colorado State. They really clamped down and kind of locked in on the defensive end, and that's what secured that win. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against Walter Clayton Jr. and Will Richard and Elijah Martin and even Denzel Aberdeen. And the thing with Florida is there's so much depth there. That's their guard room. And I didn't even mention Urban Klasvar, who got eligibility in the middle of the year, one of their international players who can come off the bench and play 5 minutes and get a foul in case, a foul is needed, just so that way a starter doesn't get one, or just shoot a couple of threes. On top of that, they have a great front court that has a ton of depth too. They have Micah Hanglockton, who came back towards the end of the season. That's the guy who broke his leg in the SEC championship game last year. And then you also have Thomas Howell, Alex Condon, and they're awesome. On top of that, Ruben Chianlu in their front court. Like, the depth that Florida has is unlike any other team in the country to me. And so I would be concerned, like, if I was Maryland from that standpoint. They have to figure out a way to slow Florida down if they want to win that game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's obviously a lot easier said than done. You had a tweet that it was something I was thinking as I saw your tweet, and I believe it was something along the lines of Walter Clayton Jr.'s made for March. And when you have a guy like that who kept hitting such timely shot after timely shot every time UConn seemed to have momentum or had a 4 or 6 point run, Walter was right there to limit it. It's just, again, like you said, hard to believe Maryland has the firepower. They're going to run their offense through Mr. Queen, and Florida's going to run their offense through a few guys. It would be curious to see how Florida defends Derek. Do they swarm him? Do they try to get the ball out of his hands as soon as he has it? Do they double late? Are they sending random defenders? It's going to be interesting to see, because, again, you said he's a freshman. He's not going to have obviously any experience getting this deep in March, but what he's seen so far, he's handled pretty damn well, and everybody remembers the quote that he gave when coach asked who wanted the basketball there at the end of that last game with Derek Queen, saying he very adamantly wanted the basketball. So that's one, Brandy. I mean, I feel like you're leaning pretty comfortable. Do you think Florida has a chance to cover the 6.5, or would you think Maryland keeps it a little tighter than that?
I think Florida covers the 6.5. I've loved this Maryland team all season long, but I just think that Florida's offense is just going to be too much for them. On top of that, Kevin Willard has been rumored to be in the mix for the Villanova head coaching job. So is there possibly a little bit of a distraction going on there? Maybe. We've seen now multiple times in March Madness, a team loses and the next day or 2 days later, a head coach of a team that lost is announced somewhere else. So I don't know if I'm sure he is fully focused as much as his ability, but I feel like I'd be remiss to not mention that. So I'm going the Gators here.
Yeah, same thing here. I could easily see that one being a double-digit win for Florida. So dang good. I think they'll be coming out a little more focus, a little more chip on the shoulder, as their season almost came to an end there with UConn if it wouldn't have been for a late barrage of points there. And UConn just kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say they gave that game away, but they played. They had a really rough couple of minute stretch there, very late in that one. And yeah, I am with you. Florida, double digits. I'll give them that. Let's move further down in that region. You're talking about the
Yeah,
10th seeded. Yeah,
Texas Tech and Arkansas, kind of a surprise. I feel like outside of Ole Miss, the other surprise, Arkansas getting to a Sweet 16, getting Boogie Flan back, and now apparently this week Cal said Edu Thiero is going to be back too. This is a really interesting matchup to me because I did not think Arkansas would get this far. On top of that, I definitely didn't think John Calipari, Mark Pope, and Kevin Young in that coaching carousel from this offseason. Never thought all three of them would be in the Sweet 16. So that's pretty impressive in my opinion. And I said this going into March Madness, which is why I didn't pick them in my bracket, but I don't know how much more juice Arkansas has left in them. So I kind of thought that was what was going to happen against St. John's, but really their athleticism is why they won that game against St. John's.
Yep.
I do think Texas Tech can match them when it comes to that piece of it. And I do think Texas Tech has a much better offense than Arkansas. They're shooting the ball well. They're shooting the ball from three at a high clip and super efficient, especially in their last 10 games. I think they're shooting like 50% 3-point attempts, and it's like the highest out of all the Sweet 16 teams, but they're also shooting it at like a 39% clip or something. Like, it's kind of crazy how great Texas A&M is shooting the ball. I love Grant McCasland and the offense that he runs. And JT Toppin, Big 12 Player of the Year, he is just so incredible for them. But it's John Calipari, and I think he has an amazing Sweet 16 record, if I'm remembering correctly.
He does.
But I still keep going back to when is this Arkansas team going to run out of juice? Are they built for a Final Four or an Elite Eight? I'm not sure. Obviously, John Calipari is like a more seasoned head coach than Grant McCasland is. But I think that Texas Tech, to me, is a better team, but Arkansas has more talent on their team. So I don't know. This one's a tough one for me. What are your thoughts on this one?
Man, it could go either way. I think, and I'm going to ask this once we get to the end. I'm going to ask your opinion, but I can tell you this: this is probably the game I'm most excited for, just because I am in Texas, and so I do love Grant McCasland. I love JT Toppin. Obviously, paid a ton of attention to that recruitment. Unfortunate that it turned out the way that it did, but I love what Tech has, and I like what Tech's been doing. Their commitment to basketball here in the last 7 or 8 years. But then you go look at Arkansas, who, as you just said, they out-athleticized St. John's. That's why they beat St. John's. Just they were more athletic. St. John's had to work really, really hard to get a decent look inside the arc. I mean, they were busting their tails to earn 2 points. And so I think Tech, like you mentioned, also they're a little more well-built to handle Arkansas and the athleticism that they'll have, the length that Arkansas's guards have. It's not just, Darian Williams and Chance McMillan. I believe Walton comes in off the bench and handles the ball really, really well and is effective, can score it. I like what Tech does shooting the ball. I mean, they have McMillan's over 40%, I know, but then I think Anderson's like plus 38. I'm just going to pull it up because now I got to know. But yeah, they shoot the ball. They have so many guys that will take it so confidently. And so if Tech's shooting the ball well at all, I really like their chances of winning here. But again, as you just said, John Calipari. Hard to pick against that guy, especially right now, because he kind of has Arkansas playing as well as they played all season. So I will go Tech, though. Give me Tech in a very, very good, very, very good game. Christian Anderson, he's over 38%. Kerwin Walton's over 39%. So
they can shoot the ball. They can shoot the leather off that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see the front court matchup because Trevin Brazile I think he's like 6'10" and JT Toppin's 6'9", something like that. And then Edu is 6'11" and Big Z 7'2". So Arkansas has a ton of length in their front court.
They do.
But you never know what Trevin Brazile is going to show up. Like the one that showed up against St. John's or the one that was kind of non-existent for half of conference play. So I think the front court piece of it will be really interesting because that to me is where Arkansas is going to score most of their points, but the perimeter is where Tech's going to score most of their points. So I'm going Texas Tech here. I think it'll be a fun game, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tech shoots lights out, it could get ugly for Arkansas.
I could see it. Yeah, absolutely. Because, again, Tech's going to let it fly. And knowing that Arkansas has that length on the inside, fully anticipate Tech, working to scheme up some jump shots. And whether they're open or not, they're going to take them. So, all right, sounds like we're both on Tech there. Glad we've been in agreement across the board so far. And moving, I guess, you want to go all the way to the top right side of the bracket, or do you want to start bottom right?
Yeah, we can start with Duke, Arizona.
All right. Well, Duke, Arizona, Cooper Flag.
Yeah,
Caleb Love.
This has gotten so much chatter because of Caleb Love, and if you scroll on TikTok right now, like all of the Caleb Love edits will make you feel like Arizona's gonna win this game by 20. I don't know. It's kind of crazy some of the stuff that I've been seeing. I'm like, wow. I really like Jaden Bradley too in their in the backcourt that they have for Arizona. But these two teams played on November 22nd, and Duke beat Arizona. I think it was by 15 or 14, something crazy like that. And I watched that game, and the first half of it, Arizona kept it close, but Duke really was just very clearly more talented, well put together. And that was back in November when I think Duke was nowhere near as good as what they are now. And Duke also got the easiest second round matchup probably of the entire tournament in Baylor. So I feel like even though Duke is a little banged up from the Cooper Flag injury, he was playing fine in that game. I think it's reported Malik Brown's going to be back. This is a game that I think Duke really does roll in. I think it could end up getting ugly for Arizona. To me, out of all the games in the Sweet 16, this to me has the most blowout potential of all of them. This one and the game we just talked about, but mainly this one. I love Tommy Lloyd. I think he's a great coach. And I think this team is good. And Caleb Love's playing the best basketball of his career in March right now. But I don't know how they stop Cooper Flag. And then if you do stop Cooper Flag, how do you stop the guards that Duke has in Isaiah Evans off the bench, Con Knipple? I mean, Proctor, I just don't – they have guys all over the floor there, and pretty kind of scary when you're a team like Arizona who I feel like doesn't do that great against a team built like how Duke is built.
Duke is loaded. There's just and as a guy that prefers North Carolina and loved Caleb Love, it's hard to see how loaded Duke is. It's hard to watch Cooper Flag play just team basketball from the moment he's walked on campus and just absolutely put wins above points and pride. He's averaging almost 19, 7, and 4. He is the real deal Holyfield. And then again, it's not just a Cooper Flag team. Talk about Tech shooting the ball well. This team shoots it better. Duke's so impressive. They really are. And it's going to be a really, really dang tough out. Arizona is not built to beat Duke. I think Caleb Love might be the only guy that has a chance to start for Duke if you were to mesh these schools together. It's going to be tough. Duke is deep. You're talking about getting Malik back, and so they get deeper. I would be shocked if Arizona keeps it within single digits, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I totally agree.
I'd be shocked. Duke's good. Duke's dang good. And once again, Grant McCasland, what could have been? I'm gonna ask you for some Sean Miller thoughts at the end as well, Brandy. We got to talk a little about Sean.
I got you.
But all right, that was probably the shortest and easiest little breakdown we've had to do. Duke is great. Arizona just great run. Tommy,
they don't have the guys. They don't have the guys.
Got to have the real horses to deal with the Blue Devils. All right, probably the team that has my heart in this Sweet 16, the Brigham Young Cougars. Get your favorite university. I'm just kidding. They get Alabama and Coach Oates and the high-flying Crimson Tide offense. When you look at this matchup, Brandy, what jumps out at you? What do you see? What do you expect?
Yeah, honestly, breaks my heart to say this since it's an Alabama game, but I think this is going to be the most exciting game of the weekend because it's just two electrifying offenses, and it's giving kind of shades of Bama and Kentucky regular season, Florida, Kentucky regular season, just two fast tempo, up tempo offenses kind of going at it. BYU has, I think, two players shooting above 40% on a high clip, and Trevin Nell and Richie Saunders. Richie Saunders is shooting like 43% from three, which is kind of crazy. And so this one's going to be really exciting because I really just feel like it's going to be a shootout. I do think Bama is more athletic than BYU is. They definitely have a lot more length, and Cliff Omori, their center, is playing probably the best basketball that he's played all season against St. Mary's and then against Auburn for the last game of the season. So if they can get that Cliff Omori in this game, that would be something I think that elevates them above BYU and gives them an advantage.
Right.
The health of Grant Nelson probably will play a part. Alabama is a really good offensive rebounding team. So if the shots aren't falling for BYU, I feel like, or for Alabama, I feel like with Bama being such a good rebounding team, that can kind of be a concern for BYU. Goes back to the athleticism thing because they have some guys that can really get up there. But also, Mark Sears is not playing good right now. He shot like a combined 4 of 17 in the first 2 rounds from three, something like that. And something is clearly off with his shot. Now, that could mean positive regression is coming for him. He could drop 30 in this game against BYU. I do think his matchup is good because he doesn't do well against bigger guards, and BYU doesn't necessarily have a bigger guard outside of Igor. And I'm not sure if they're going to put Igor on Mark Sears because I don't think he could stay in front of him.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so I think this is a game where it's like Mark Sears could have a really great get right game. Just depends on like, is there something else going on, maybe mentally or whatever with his shot for why he's been playing poorly lately. So I do think Mo Diabate for Alabama really elevates the ceiling of this team. He's been really great from three, which is like he didn't really have a three ball all season and has somehow found one. So that'll be really interesting. But I do really like the style of play that Kevin Young has kind of brought to BYU. And I do really like Richie Saunders. I like Kiba, which is their center. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And then Igor. Igor is kind of like I don't even know how to describe Igor's style of play, but I feel like he's almost like a unicorn sometimes out there in a good way. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of how he is offensively against this Alabama team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was thinking pest. You were thinking like really nice and beautiful, majestic, and I was like, yeah, he's kind of like a pest. Like that's what I think of when I think of his type of player. But like I would want that type of player on my team. Richie Saunders is great. I believe Kiba Kita is the big guy, and he's fun to watch. But I don't know if he can board, and BYU can board with Alabama. BYU is going to have to shoot it at a really high clip, and they're going to try to. I mean, they're going to pull shots. The big question is, how do they defend Alabama? As you said, how do they try to match up? Part of me thinks that they just let Igor go at Mark Sears, give his best effort, try to cut off every passing lane, and just force Mark Sears to beat them one-on-one. Let him get his. He'd probably still score 25 or 30, but try to limit Grant Nelson, Latrell Wrightsell, and the rest of that really damn good Alabama lineup. I mean, they can score. There's no doubt there. This seems to be a pretty good matchup style-wise for Alabama because it's another team that wants to go high-flying up and down, a lot of possessions, a lot of jump shots, but they don't have the speed, they don't have the athleticism that Alabama has. So matchup-wise, I mean, definitely, you lean Alabama. Do you think this is close, or do you think this is a game that Alabama could run away with?
I think this is going to be a close game. I just think that BYU's offense is so good. I mean, they shot 46% from three against Wisconsin, and it's not like that's a fluke. Like they've done that before this season. So yes, Alabama is really good. And yes, they have, I think, a little bit of an upper hand when it comes to athleticism and length. But the styles match up to me really well for what makes for an exciting game. So I think it is going to be just like a good back and forth, like first to 100 track meet type of basketball game. Maybe like might feel like we're watching an NBA game at sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. Like you said, it's probably going to be. There's some really damn good games. I think it was a bit of a lackluster, round of 64, round of 32, just because we're in a new era of college basketball, and all of these Cinderella teams, they don't have some of the pieces that they would have had, because they're getting poached for depth, or they're getting poached to come run offenses in the SEC, the Big Ten, the other power conferences, and so it was still a blast and fun to watch. But when you look at some of these Sweet 16 matchups and how they kind of on paper the matchups, I mean, there's stylistically like BYU and Alabama is going to be a blast. Like you said, there could be 200 points in this game. It's going to be really really fun to watch. That being said, I still think Bama's just a little too much. I will say this: I'll be rooting for BYU. I have Cougars outside of Rick Barnes in Tennessee. No offense, Brandy, but I think you obviously know the connection there. But BYU is a team I'm probably pulling for the most outside of Rick Barnes Vols. So let's
I think
go.
Bama
Go ahead.
wins, but I hope BYU wins. I think
Oh, I know
Bama
you.
wins. I hope BYU wins. That's my take there.
And moving on, we're gonna go to my national championship pick, the Houston Cougars,
Houston,
the
lots
Purdue
of Texas teams.
Boilermakers. My guy LJ Cryer talking about built for March. Houston's been so dang good. They've been around. Kelvin Sampson knows this tournament. He's flirted with glory here several times in his career, taking many teams deep. He knows what's going on. I love what Houston's doing. Do you think Purdue can derail the Houston train, Brandy?
I don't. Although this game is being played in Indianapolis, which is really close to Purdue's campus, I don't know how Purdue's going to score in this game. And if you watch Purdue in this tournament, I feel like they had a little bit of an easy game against McNeese in the round of 32. But in the round of 64, High Point hung in there with them and played really strong defense against them. And if they didn't get in foul trouble, like I honestly think High Point could have pulled off an upset. This Purdue team will only go as far as Braden Smith takes them, and he has been playing really great lately. But I don't know how he's going to score on this Houston defense. Like, it's so tough to get a bucket against them. And if Houston goes out to any kind of lead, Purdue, in my opinion, is in trouble. Going to need a huge game from TKR against Tugler. But Tugler is one of the best defenders in the country. So I'm not really sure. I just can't. I don't think that Purdue matches up well at all in this game. Like, how are they going to score? And Houston, towards the end of probably like the back third of the season, really found their offensive identity, which at the beginning of the season kind of lost a couple games, dropped a game to Auburn, dropped a game to Alabama, another team too. And people were like, what's going on with Houston? And then all of a sudden they like lost one more game to Texas Tech, I think in overtime or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, that's the Houston we know. And I think throughout the season, they really found their offensive identity, and that's what propelled them to getting a 1 seed to where they're at now. And so that's kind of scary when you think about a Houston basketball team. Like, everybody always thinks about defense, and their defense is why they're in the position that they're in now. But just like them being able to get offense from Milos Uzan, from Jawan Roberts, and from LJ Cryer, like, that is huge. On top of Tugler just becoming an absolute defensive force throughout the entire season. It's been really awesome to see. And so if Emmanuel Sharp, Milos Uzan, Jawan Roberts all play offensively the way that they have towards the back half or the last 2/3 of the season, like, I think that Houston's going to win this game. And I don't want to say win it handedly, because I do feel like Gonzaga gave them a nice run there. And I could see Purdue having a similar game plan that Gonzaga had. But I do think Houston wins. I think it's just going to be too much for Purdue. But maybe a home crowd advantage will help Purdue out a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, I think a crowd definitely will play into it some. Purdue basketball, obviously a very rabid fan base. I think they show up in Indianapolis. Of course they will. But again, the experience and, I mean, I think just sheer determination from this Houston team. A lot of guys who have played a lot of NCAA tournament games. And so you talk about, I mean, Purdue, I want to say they average high 70s, but it's all from, Kaufman, Renner, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lloyd, like that's their offense. I think between the three of them, they score over 50 a game. So a huge part of that offense. Two of them averaging over, 40% from deep. So yeah, Houston, in my opinion, is not going to let just like two or three guys beat them. It would take a full team effort. So maybe Purdue has a guy or two step up and play really, really well. But I just think Houston matches up really, really well. I'm talking Tugler's been a beast. Jawan Roberts is no slouch, there. I think he starts at forward. Like, they're tough. Houston is nails defensively, and that's going to take you a long way in this tournament. You combine that with elite guard play like the Cougars have, And that right there is a recipe for a title. And so, yeah, I'd be shocked if Purdue wins this game. Could see Purdue keeping it within single digits, of course, battling, making Houston sweat late. Like you said, Gonzaga, as well as Houston played in that game, Gonzaga still had somewhat of a chance late in that one. Going to be fun, though. I mean, it's not like on paper, the most sexiest matchup or anything. You have, U of H and Purdue, but I mean, it could be overall could be one of the better games of the weekend. I don't know. I need Houston to win for my brackets. Brackets are struggling, which is something I'm going to say every single, late March. Last game, Brandy. This is an all SEC affair. This is a massive game. I mean, rivals. This is just fun for Twitter. Kentucky, Tennessee, Vol Nation, Big Blue Nation going at it. First thing I want to ask you about this is: do you care who wins this at all?
No, I don't. But I would not like to. I don't want Tennessee to get a Final Four just because it's really fun to poke at their fan base and be like, "You guys don't have a Final Four, but they consider themselves a semi-basketball school." I do like Rick Barnes though. I have a little bit of a soft spot for him. I don't really care. I don't really care who wins this game. I think it's going to be awesome though. Because also like this is being played in Indianapolis too, and Kentucky and Tennessee are both right there. So I think there's going to be a ton of Kentucky fans. I'm assuming it's going to be that whole place is going to be covered in both Purdue and Kentucky fans for that entire Sweet 16 and Elite 8. But these two teams have faced off twice this year, and Kentucky's won both of the matchups. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. People always say it's hard to beat a team 3 times. I think it's easy to beat a team 3 times. You beat them twice, you know how you match up well against them, and just like keep doing what you're doing. So I do think maybe injuries might play a little bit of a part here, but Kentucky looked a lot healthier in their game against Illinois. Lamont Butler being back is huge, and you can tell he's playing through an injury, but it still seems like he's playing 95, 99% of his ability, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And sounds like Eddie is in Indianapolis, and he might be going to the Sweet 16 this weekend. So I actually think this is an awesome matchup for Kentucky. But Tennessee is playing like some of the best basketball I feel like they've played in a good bit. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I have Kentucky simply because matchup basketball wise, I think Kentucky has an upper hand here. Chaz Lanier has been great in the first 2 games of the tournament, but if you look at his kind of full body of work from this season, he's had these games and even back-to-back games where it's like he's awesome, one of the best players on the floor, and then the next game you're like, why can't his shot fall? And it's like instead of having a 20 or 25 or 29, I think was his last game, point game, he has like a 10-point game or 15-point game. Which I think those are the 2 stat lines he had against Kentucky the first time. Yeah, ironically. But he's kind of all over the place. But when he's on, like, he's a hooper. And I do think Sakai gets a lot of hate. And I'm not the biggest Sakai fan per se, but he's seasoned and he's an experienced guard, especially in this Rick Barnes system. So maybe that'll be a little bit more of an advantage in March than per say like the regular season, since this is all a brand new team together under Pope.
Man, the Kai Ziegler, I won't call it slander, but I mean, you mentioned the system of Rick Barnes, and the system of Rick Barnes, it seems to get a lot less effective this time of the year. And this is a coach that I love, and I hope he wins the national championship. But this is about the time of, this is about the round where it all normally comes to an end for a Rick Barnes led club. And Kentucky's looked really damn good. If you like good guard play, this is the game for you this weekend. You probably have 5 or 6 guards that will obviously play in the NBA. Just a ton of talent. And Kentucky looks a little bit more energized, a little bit more fresh. Maybe the deep run Tennessee had in the SEC tournament. Maybe that has a little bit of an effect on the legs of Tennessee. I don't know, but they looked a little bit more sluggish, I'll say, than Kentucky. But I can't do it. I can't pick against Tennessee. This is the first time we'll disagree, Brandy. I'm going to take Tennessee because, like you said, Zakai Ziegler is seasoned. He has been around, played a ton of tournament games. It's got to turn around at some point in March for my guy Rick Barnes. I love Chaz Lanier. Akpar is a stud inside.
Look, Amari
Tennessee,
Williams is going to punk Akpara. I'm telling you.
I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked. Okay, these are. I mean, I say the game I'm most excited for is Texas Tech and Arkansas, and that's because of I like Grant McCasland a lot. Arkansas is very interesting because they're the Tennessee. They're playing pretty well. I had them picked in a bracket. This is probably the real game of the weekend. I mean, this is going to be, fantastic hoops here. And now it stinks for whoever wins this game. There's going to be a ton of hype, and then Houston probably puts them in a chokehold to get to the Final Four right after.
I agree. I do agree. I don't care who wins this game. I think Houston is going to handedly beat them in the next round.
Yeah, but I mean, it's going to be an exciting one, and probably as good a basketball environment as you'll find in the NCAA tournament. And so I'm so pumped to watch this one. I just really need Tennessee to win. I need some point, and it's not because of Tennessee fans or Vol Nation or my Vol Twitter friends. It's just because of Rick Barnes. I like Zakai. I like Chad. I need them to just break through one time. And now Tennessee fans will probably, they'd be a little bit insufferable. I get it. But now that does, they win and they face the team that I picked to win the Natty. So eventually I'm going to have to go against the Vols. So I guess at the end of the day, there will be no real issue if Kentucky finds a way. But I had to go against you at least once. We couldn't just agree on all 8 games there. Brandy, anything else? Wait, can't do this. Sean Miller, talk to me.
Oh, yeah.
We talked a lot about the Texas coaching search, just via text and DMs and whatnot. And a lot of my real thoughts on the search, and I kind of felt like Sean Miller was the floor for the search and needed something a little bit more splashy. Leave it to a Texas fan to need a real splashy hire. Can't just be a good hire. It's got to be a great, sexy, splashy, news drop. Everybody stop what you're doing and pay attention to us type coach. But no, I'm very happy with Sean Miller at the end of the day. Talk to me about your thoughts as that was going on, and then once it was finalized, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting hire. I think he is a really good coach. I'll start off by saying that. X's and O's, I like Sean Miller. I think he's a good recruiter too, and the resources he'll get at Texas are going to be unlike any of the resources he's had in his career at both of his stops at Xavier and at his stop at Arizona. So I think that's going to be really exciting to see, how does Sean Miller do in the NIL and portal era now that he has more resources, because I think he definitely will, as opposed to at Xavier. But also, he's going to be playing in the hardest conference that he's played in his entire career. So Big East basketball is great, and it has been. Pac-12 basketball when he was at Arizona was just okay. And so maybe Big East is probably a tad comparable now that I'm thinking about it to the SEC play, but it's a step up, and the SEC is as good as it ever has been in this sport. And so he's going to have to perform and he's going to have to deliver. So I think that I like the hire. I am interested to see how he fits personality wise at Texas. Cause when I think about Sean Miller as a basketball coach and as just a person off the court and his press conferences and kind of this is weird to say, but his aura, does he fit at Texas? How is he going to work with y'all's boosters? I'm not as familiar with y'all's boosters, but that was my only question was okay, he's a great coach. I think he's going to do really well there, but what does the fit look like? So maybe you can shed some more light on your thoughts on the actual fit itself, because from a pure basketball standpoint, I'm A+, but from a fit standpoint, which sometimes matters just as much as the other part of it, what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on that piece of it?
Well, first I'll agree with you as far as the scheme, the X's and O's. He'll bring an exciting brand of basketball to a new venue. It's a couple of years old now, but a new very exciting venue. Texas fans love to pack it. We need just any type of reason to show up, and we really hadn't had one in the last year and a half. And it's okay. It's not a knock on Rodney Terry. It didn't work out, but I played guard in college. I am 5'11" and 3/4. I love to shoot the ball. Texas is about to love to shoot the deep ball. Fans are going to be pleased, I think, from the stylistic standpoint. It's going to be a lot of offense. Sean's going to go recruit big guards, long guards that are, going to be able to drive, going to be able to shoot. Now, defense, we might not see the same defensive intensity that we've seen in Texas under the last few coaches between Shaka, Chris Beard, and now Rodney Terry. Which you talk about fits. It's like, man, like who would fit at Texas in basketball? We've had so many in the last 12 years. We've had, or I guess 11 years, we've had Rick Barnes, Shaka, Chris Beard, Rodney Terry, and all pretty strongly different personalities. And so I
Very much
don't
so.
know. I don't know because it's like I know Chris Beard was off to a really, really hot start with boosters, and him and Sean Miller seem to come off very different from one another. And I'm not saying that's good or bad for Sean. I don't know. I do know this: as long as football and baseball keep winning, there is insurmountably less pressure on Sean Miller to really figure things out in an urgent fashion. But at the same time, and we talk about this, and I'm surprised to hear some Texas media folks hear that they hadn't heard this yet. But Chris Del Conte loves basketball more than he loves football or baseball. And if you look at him hiring Jamie Dixon at TCU, which is a huge deal for TCU at that time, he loves the game. He went and pulled the coup of Chris Beard from Texas Tech, and he wants Texas basketball to be relevant. And so I think he will provide him with the necessary resources. I think that he always has kind of had his eye on Sean Miller. Sean Miller turned this job down when Chris Del Conte hired Rodney Terry and made him the permanent, the head coach and not just the interim tag after the Elite Eight run. So I think it says a lot about Del Conte's opinion of Sean Miller, is he was going to turn to him after Rodney Terry made that the Elite Eight run and turn the program over to him. But I'm also a fan that loves basketball and really, really wants this to work out. I do know that he will have the NIL backing, and that's something that Rodney Terry did not have. And so again, that's not exactly fair to Rodney Terry. I don't know, all the ins and outs as to why that was. I do know that Texas boosters, they want to feel confident in their investments. They want to know that their investments are going to turn out to be winners. And so that's why I think, at times when people pick on these colleges, like, oh, they don't have the money. Well, I just think it's at points they stop believing, they stop buying in, they stop investing into the program.
They want to invest into their person.
That is exactly right.
Right. And if it's not their person and they don't believe in that, they're like, well, I don't want to put I see that at Auburn a lot. Like in football, for example, we did not back Brian Harsin from an NIL perspective or resources, and we are with Freeze. And that's just kind of the politics of college athletics.
Yep. And it goes down to even athletic directors, because a new AD comes in, you have a coach who's been here for 10 years. Well, maybe it's not the athletic director's type of coach, and his results are good, but maybe they're not good enough to, find an excuse for not getting rid of the guy. So it's tough out there. And again, like, I don't want any of the shows that we've talked about Rodney Terry or anything to seem slanderous. It's not that it didn't work out. But we kind of knew that. If you've watched, the scheme, if you watch what Texas was doing in recruiting, the way the pieces fit together that we collected in the portal last year, I mean, the writing was always kind of on the wall. And so I am very excited to have Sean Miller again. I told, Brandy in the very beginning, it seemed like Sean Miller was going to take the job if offered. And now Texas did, reach out and communicate with other coaches. Now, maybe that is to appease a few boosters. Maybe that, one big basketball backer wants you to reach out to a Bill Self or a Grant McCasland or whoever it may have been. But at the end of the day, Sean Miller is a coach. I'm very excited for it. The style of play is the main thing. I know that he's going to recruit all over this country and internationally if needed. And I mean, again, this is a program who's played in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament just one time since the year 2008, just once. We made the Elite Eight. It was a great run. But I mean, that is crazy to me because I grew up watching Texas in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. And I know that's not who we are. That's not the standard. It's a new era.
Well,
NIL's changing things.
Sean Miller's been to 4 Sweet 16s and 2 Elite Eights. So that's already more than...
Yeah, I mean,
Texas that's
Sean Miller was doing at Xavier in Arizona what Rick Barnes was doing at Texas during the 2000s. I mean, it was Sweet 16 or Elite Eight almost every single. 7 out of 10 years there for Texas, and then Sean Miller, his teams have played in the second weekend. I think the stat is 7 out of 12 years now, and you go look at the second half of the game against Texas, and he made some adjustments in the second half and got some guards free, and it's hey, I'm excited. I can talk about other coaches all day long because that's just how we are as fans. We're like, okay, like you said, you want your guy, this guy, and I personally, there's a couple coaches that I knew would have taken this Texas job, and I don't want to come across as bitter. It's not at all. It's just a full range of my thought process during the coaching search after the hire. But I've already put it in about 100 group chats. Like we're winning the Natty soon. We're coming. Sean Miller's a guy, and obviously I don't fully buy in like that easily, but I'm just saying I'm on board. We back the hire and we're ready to rock.
Well, like you said too, like the international aspect to me is huge. I think and when he was at Arizona for 12 years, he signed like 13 different international players, and 6 of them went to the NBA. DeAndre Ayton from the Bahamas, Laurie I can never say Laurie's last name. He's from Finland. Benedict Mathurin's from Canada, and a bunch of other players too. So, like that aspect to me means a lot in the current era that we're in, because we're seeing international players more and more make their presence in college basketball. I mean, there's a handful of international players that are about to play in the Sweet 16. You have Chad Baker-Mazara from the Dominican on Auburn's team. You have Aiden Holloway on Alabama, who's from Canada. You have Yegor. I don't even know where Yegor's from on BYU, but it's not the U.S. And there's a couple of other players too that are international guys, and there's a massive wave, and not only in college basketball but in the NBA, so just basketball in general for international players. So that's kind of huge and adds a little bit of a different splash to the types of players that you could get playing basketball at Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. And Texas is a school that has got a high percentage of international students, and one of the country's highest. I have no problem. I mean, we've recruited nationally in other sports. And so, long story short, I think with the resources, as you mentioned, Brandy, the recruiting prowess of Sean Miller, he's shown he's committed to going out and getting kids in his past. And now that that's not exactly a no-no, I think he'll do just fine. So very excited. I would be happy just for what it's worth. Give me 4 or 5 Sweet 16s in a decade with maybe 2 or 3 seasons where we won that game. And what happened from there? I mean, that's just icing on the cake. We're talking about a program
it's the hardest sport to win a national championship in. So
yeah, and I mean we've not sniffed one. I mean, made the Final Four when I was, I believe, in 8th grade, and paid the maximum price that Carmelo Anthony was ready to give out. And it's just like you're watching it and you're like, man, this guy's really good. And then, one of the greatest scorers of all time. It's like, what, we had to play him? That's so cool. Lucky us. But Brandy, thank you for doing this. We agree mostly on our Sweet 16 picks and breakdowns. I think it's going to be a really, really fun weekend here. Anything that you want to drop on us before you get out of here?
I don't think so. Good luck in all your brackets, and War Eagle, I guess.
Or Eagle, she says. Yep. Go Vols, go Cougars, go Tigers. I think, and the other Cougars too.
No Red Raiders.
I'm rooting for Tech. I'll say that.
I am just because I like Grant McCaslin.
JT Toppin would have looked a lot better in burnt orange, but the fact that he's not can't hold it against the man. So, yeah, wreck him Tech. How the hell with it. But all right, Brandy, thank you for doing this. Anybody watching, please throw a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you like SEC baseball, we had Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball on earlier with Dave Myrick and Zachary Sim. They talked a little bit of SEC baseball, and they didn't really troll the Aggies too hard. So anybody watching, go watch that one if you like SEC baseball. Thanks.